would like to say before we start today's meeting, a big thank you to everyone who participated in our steering committee. This is a first big step in the process, and you know, the steering committee was made up of a lot of different individuals. We'll hear a little bit more about that. The great thing is that we're bringing together lots of different perspectives to get information tonight, but this is one step in the process. And I think that a lot of our listeners out there tonight and community members are looking at this presentation tonight with a whole spectrum of expectations and needs. And I'm going to encourage everybody just to be patient with the process and listen all the way through and understand that there's lots of different reasons that the information comes out as it is. And we'll also have the opportunity to get more perspectives, get more ideas on the table, and respond to those this evening and beyond, and fine tune things as we go. So with that, Lynn, we're going to turn it over to you for the presentation.
Okay. So, Megan, did you want to put the presentation up and we will get started? Thank you. So, beyond excited that we were able to get this board workshop together, I first want to thank the Board of Education. You have been a great sounding board as we have moved through this process. I want to thank the shared decision-making bodies at the buildings. I want to share and shout out a big thank you to our K-12 steering committee. We had 42 individuals who came out over 2 weeks and really dug in deep to talk about once the New York State Education Department got our plan guidelines out, and also my leadership team, all of them facilitated groups in the 5 subgroups, and we took all of the feedback and the input from that along with the surveys and some other items that we'll talk about to move forward with our reopening plan. We are committed to communicating with you throughout this process, and I want you to know as we move through this that we also have not just been doing this over 2 weeks, that we have been planning, talking, discussing, problem solving for months now. So as I said, the district is committed to ongoing communication. And can you go back just a minute, Meg? You're going to have an opportunity to submit questions via email later in the presentation at the email link there. It's not going to link to anything. You actually have to put that link in your email. You can, if that's not easy enough for you and you have the Lake George Board of Education email, you can use that. I want to thank Ms. Bonnie Hart, who has stepped up to help organize those questions. So as they're coming in, she's going to be organizing them into some subgroups. We're also, my expectation is we're going to get through the presentation, and then when we're done, we're going to ask questions and have a great dialogue with all the board members about the questions that they have had. They have seen this presentation, and it has been evolving up until even a couple hours ago, and we will do the very best to answer questions at the end of this meeting for the community. So when we're done with the discussion with the board, we will take a look at your questions. We might take a 2-minute break just to maybe use the facilities and the ladies' room and the men's room, and then come back refreshed to go over the community questions. I'm also going to be, and I have asked, and I appreciate the leaders who have stepped up to present their subcommittee slides. And so you can see that this is a really coordinated and collaborative effort. And we don't have all the answers, but we sure are going to try and find the answers that we don't have and try to manage this process and school as we know it moving into the future. So I thank you for being with us. Go ahead, Meg. So these are the things that we have learned since the close of school March 2020. There's no place or replacement for the value realized from in-person educational experiences that occur here at Lake George Central School District. We know that the teacher-student connection is essential to engagement and social emotional wellness and learning. Our schools provide our students with social and emotional well-being, and our schools are an important centerpiece of our community. Our schools hold a crucial role in all that is associated with teaching and learning. Go ahead, Meg. So as we moved through the last couple months, we've listened, we've learned, we've adjusted, and we've come back to the drawing table and really had to hammer out a lot of things. We've really come to consensus on several items, and we have a couple items that we need to talk through tonight to just get some clarity around. But really, as we moved through the last couple months, the themes and the priorities that Lake George put forth was first and foremost the safety of our faculty, staff, students, and our community. We very much believe that if we don't really focus this first month and through the whole school year constantly on connecting with our students and our families through a variety of measures, including open, transparent communication, that will be absolutely at the forefront of everything that we do. The plan, as we will move through it, which if you have seen our presentation or our PowerPoint, really focuses on a practice model, an ease-in model to help us be prepared. And we'll talk more about that as we move forward. The social emotional well-being of our students and our faculty and staff is on our minds very much right now, and we have planned for this. Equity and access for all students, regardless of whether they're in kindergarten or 12th grade, is something that we've talked a great deal about and we have absolutely decided to prioritize. Teaching and learning is obviously what we want to get done here every single day. However, when you put all these things together, there will be a great balance and forward motion moving into the fall. Go ahead, Meg. There's been a great deal of collaboration, feedback, and input since March. As far as collaboration, the building level shared decision-making teams have been working since day one, since we moved out of school. Our principals have guided that work and really organized it and kept us moving forward with some essential questions. The K-12 steering committee that was formed had 42 members, many of them from shared decision-making bodies. We had parents on those. We had leaders on those and teachers on special assignments, as well as our leaders who facilitated, some of our leadership team who facilitated the 5 subgroups. The feedback that we used we had a lot of surveys going on, and I personally and professionally want to apologize to you because I know at this time we use surveys a lot and we did not mean to overuse them, but during this time it is really the time period that we push them out, and we really appreciate everyone who has taken the time to give us that feedback. Most recently, we sent a parent and a faculty and staff survey to just find out how you are feeling and some of the priorities around returning to school. Again, the folks on the K-12 steering committee and subcommittees gave us a lot of feedback in our face-to-face discussions. A lot of us came in and really got around the table with the social distancing rules and just talked about how did it go, what we learned, and how we can move into the future knowing and learning from where we've been. The input, again, the parent surveys, the faculty and staff surveys, the steering committee, as far as what we're going to present tonight, have played a very, very crucial role in getting from point A to point B. And what you don't know is that pretty much since the beginning of June, our WSHWE BOCES put together a lot of reentry committees. So I also want to point out that our school business officials on the facilities back to school committee, our staff, Jim Conway is on the building level committee. Ms. Kim Wilson is on the social emotional committee. Jamie Bear has been meeting with her directors of special education and the BOCES folks to help support that work. Megan Coker it meets frequently with the Curriculum Assessment Council, along with Ginny and Bonnie, who are our curriculum TOSAs. And I have been on the district level committee with the CSOs. We've been talking to the Department of Health and a lot of attorneys, a lot of advocacy folks and folks from state ed to make sure that we don't miss anything. So that work has really been ongoing since the beginning of June. So what we're going to talk about tonight is a proposed, what we call ease-in reopening plan. It has 3 stages or 3 phases to the plan. And really our goal that we keep coming back to is a safe return to an in-person instruction through a gradual phase-in approach of bringing our students and our faculty to school and ultimately practicing so that we can return to in-person instruction for all students, if possible. And when I say if possible, as you know, the governor is going to tell us what we can and cannot do as far as reopening the week of the 1st through the 7th. So that's really what I put in for the possibility, but also there are some students that cannot come back for a variety of reasons, and we also need to make sure that we're planning for those students as well. So right now I'm going to give the presentation over to Ms. Bonnie Hart, who has agreed to talk us through phase 1, 2, and 3. Then we will hear from Mr. Varney around safety and facilities and some of the changes that we have worked through with those subcommittees, as well as Ms. Coker. She will talk a lot about some of our alternative model. Sorry. And then we will also hear from Ms. Wilson, and we will hear from the CSE director, Jamie Bear, and then we will continue on with me for Q&A and some more discussion. So as of now, I'm going to give it to Bonnie and talk to us about phase 1.
Thank you, Lynn. Before I get into the reentry, it's really important for people to understand all schools across New York State are required to submit an in-person plan, a hybrid plan, and a full remote plan. What I'm going to go through is in addition to that, which is our reentry. This reentry is not just one of those plans. Megan will go into detail about the hybrid and the full remote. I will talk about in-person, some specific things about in-person. But what I'm going to focus on right now is reentry. This is for the first few weeks of school. As the year continues from October to June, we will not come back to the schedule. If there's a change in whatever model we're currently in, it will either be remote, in-person, or hybrid. So what I'm going to go through is just for September, and it is our re-entry from our school closure back in March. So the re-entry plan is broken into 3 phases, keeping in mind, again, our ultimate goal is to get 100% of our students back, or all of our students back in person as soon as possible. Plan in phase 1 is the first 2 days of school with students on September 8th and 9th, and we are calling this an orientation days. This is where connections will be built. We will talk a lot about safety protocols. We will practice them, expectations. On the right here, you can see how it will be broken down. So on Tuesday, the 8th, grades K through 4, and 7 and 8 will come to school for a half a day. The other grades, 5, 6, 9 through 12, will be at home doing orientation. And all of this, what does home orientation activities mean and what is going to be done in that half day will be shared with you. A lot of the details we're still working out, and they will be shared with you as soon as we have them. We also want to wait and make sure our plan is approved from the governor before we get all of these details in the event it did not get approved. On the second day, it will flip-flop. So K4 will be at home doing orientation activities, and 7, 8 as well. And then grades 5, 6, and 9 through 12 will be a half a day in person. This also allows staff a half a day to continue with professional development and adjusting to what we have the year ahead. After those first 2 days, we then move into phase 2. Now, phase 2 will be for 2 full weeks, and then the 2 days in the first week, Thursday, Friday, and then the following 2 weeks. So we're looking at September 10th through September 25th. During this time, we will also have students in person, alternating with some grade levels remote for an every other day approach. This is just from September 10th through September 25th. This allows us, again, to practice and communicate the safety protocols and procedures that will be in place for the upcoming year. Schedule on the right shows the Thursday, Friday of the first week, and then the following week. You could continue that out, and I foresee these schedules being sent home, and it will be expanded upon for the entire time, but you could follow it out where it alternates. Grades K4 and 7 and 8 will be in person the entire time, and grades 5, 6, 9 through 12 will be alternating every other day. Up there you will see targeted students. Targeted students are students that have been identified but not limited to students in special class, English language learners, or disengaged students. They are prioritized students as indicated by the state or needed by the state, and they will be in person the entire time, regardless of their grade level. Once we get through those 2 weeks, then we move to phase 3, and we reevaluate everything. Somewhere I'm getting feedback. And if all protocols have been followed and we feel everything is good to go, then beginning on September 28th, we're looking at all students return to in-person learning daily. That's all grade levels K through 12. So that is the re-entry up to September 28th. What does in-person mean? And then Megan will continue with the remote and all the hybrid model. So it's important to
Bonnie, can I just go back to 2 slides just for 1 minute? I just want to interject one thing, and that was wonderful. Also, while we're practicing, I want to make sure that people understand that this plan, what we did is made sure that each building had a reduced capacity, so that when we first started our discussions, I want people to know that we could go back to 100% now. The guidelines for New York State says we can get 740 students back and somewhat around 200 staff back. But in listening and learning, it's not just about the capacity. As a superintendent, I really wanted to be cautious, knowing that our students and our faculty and staff, that their safety is paramount in all of this, that this phase-in plan really allowed each building to have and work with a reduced capacity, trying to practice the safety protocols, and also every other day for the 4th and 5th, or the 5th and 6th grade students, and the 7th and 8th, they're the youngest, the 7th and 8th are the youngest the 9th and 12th are the oldest to be able to practice that, as well as the 5th and 6th, kind of like the 5th and 6th are the seniors and the juniors. But you really get the expectation to those parents and those students to be practicing if we have to go remote or if we are asked to go hybrid. So I just wanted to clarify, like, there's a lot of different items that made us move in this direction, but really, capacity, could we start up 100%? We could. Are we prepared to do that? That's the question that we really need to answer and be assured about by October 28th. Thanks for letting me interject, Bonnie.
I believe Lynn meant September 28th. So now to talk about what in-person is. Megan, can you go? Thank you. So in-person learning, in order for us to have students in person, there's certain guidelines that are set by the state. Okay, not a local decision. This is a state decision. If we are categorized in the capital region, even though some people think we're North Country, based on the state categorizations, we are capital region, and we have to remain in phase 4, and the daily infection rate needs to remain below 5% using a 14-day average. If that occurs, then Governor Cuomo has said schools can open. So what will that look like? Student schedules will closely resemble our traditional schedules, but there may be staggered times for transitions. Attendance is required and recorded daily. And upon reopening, the district will adhere to the CDC guidelines. So in the chart here, we really are highlighting some key safety protocols that we will be implementing. And as a parent, very important for you to know, it's something that people want to know. Will my child wear masks part of the time or all of the time? So the first is our class sizes and configurations will reflect the need for social distancing for no less than 6 feet apart. And shortly, Mike Varney will show some sample pictures that show classrooms, how they will be laid out and configured to adhere to that. Masks will be worn at all times during the day, except for lunch, and there will be scheduled mask breaks. And when the core of the activity prevents usage, and that is state language. And what is meant by the core of activity prevents usage is, for instance, playing a musical instrument in band. They cannot perform the task with a mask on, so they will remove the mask to do that. However, the state has established guidelines in that case, in PE as well as in band and chorus, they need to be 12 feet apart. Temperature checks will be taken daily as students are entering the building. There will be weekly screening forms required for parents to fill out on all children every single week. There will be no lockers this year or cubbies. There will be traffic patterns in the hallway. And then there will be daily cleaning. So that is in person, the safety protocols. Mr. Varney will show some of the photos of classrooms that have been set up. And then Megan will talk about, well, if we're not in person, then what would we be?
Thanks, Bonnie. As Bonnie has said, we've been out and about in the district, taking a look at our spaces and trying to make sure that we can safely socially distance our students in a variety of different circumstances. What you're looking at on the left here is one of the classrooms in the 7th grade cluster. There's 12 desks in there. And what you're looking at on the right is one of the classrooms in the upstairs hallway that goes towards the back of the building. There are currently 15 desks in there, probably could fit 3 more. And we've prepared a rough map of the district and ranges as to what we can safely socially distance in those areas. One of the things that's going to be real important is we're going to need to remove extra furniture. You know, in some classrooms, there's multiple desks, there's tables, there's soft furniture. Things like that are going to need to be removed and stored. The less that can be touched is the less that needs to be cleaned. So that's going to be real important. So at the elementary school, that would include things like the cubbies and common areas. And what you're looking at there is a picture of one portion of one of the clusters where you could fit about 14 to 18 desks. And you can see all of the cubbies were pushed back into the common area in the back. But what's going to happen in some cases is a classroom might need to spill out a little bit into the common area. So, you know, right now there's a lot of desks, extra furniture, and we don't want students congregating at the cubbies. So, you know, over the next month, a huge project for this district is going to be to remove excess furniture and to store it somewhere. And we're looking at options for that now, potentially parking storage trailers, pods, something along those lines in Route 9 parking lot by the elementary school. And the next picture is the cafeteria. Both cafeterias are almost exactly the same size. And, you know, as we move things around, one of the things going to happen is a lot of these desk sleds where the chair and the desk are connected will have to come out of classrooms. And a good use for these is to socially distance the cafeteria. We can put about 50 students in the cafeteria. So the picture that you're looking at here, the surrounding tables on the outside would be taken out and stored, and we would be adding more of the desk sleds. That works well for the cafeteria because this is a mask-free area. So, you know, it's important that students are stationary, 6 feet apart. And I guess it would be similar to your experience dining out, although we're not bringing food to your desk. But you would have a mask on as you're going up to the cafeteria line, or moving around, go to the garbage, whatever the case may be. And then obviously when you sit down, you take your mask off to eat. And, you know, with only 50 students in here, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, we'll have a system where some students will be eating in classrooms, and some students will be eating in the cafeteria based on predetermined schedules. Next slide, please. For transportation, we are going to be sending out a survey addressing multiple issues, but one of those issues will be one, encouraging parents to bring their student to school and pick them up to reduce the density and the ridership that we're going to have when school starts. And also just to get a firm handle of what that ridership is going to be. We're going to need to know, you know, concretely before school starts who's going to be using the bus. We're going to sit students one to a seat. So on a 66 passenger bus, that would be 22 students, 11 rows on each side, and they would be required to wear a mask at all times, entering the bus, exiting the bus while they're seated. Appropriate social distancing to the extent practicable, you know, as much as possible on those buses. And transportation will be provided to and from the same address 5 weeks. They're going to have assigned seats, so it's going to be important. We're just not going to be able to accommodate, you know, on-the-spot changes during the week because that would require moving around the whole seating chart. So we're going to have assigned seats on the buses. After the AM run, the buses will be cleaned and disinfected, and after the PM run, buses will be cleaned and disinfected. For child nutrition, as far as the cafeteria goes, again, students will eat in the cafeteria or classroom based on a predetermined schedule. We're working on a system to allow students to be able to pre-order their meals online even before the day starts. Masks can be removed when seated and eating, but are required while moving, as I discussed before. Students will not be able to share food and beverages. They're going to be spaced out 6 feet apart anyway. All students will wash their hands or use hand sanitizer prior to going to the cafeteria. That's pretty easy to accomplish in the elementary school. There's bathrooms all over the place. A little bit more of a challenge in the high school. We're in the process of acquiring and installing the touchless hand sanitizers so we can disperse them around the school. And also using spaces that we wouldn't traditionally use. What science classrooms have access to warm water or home and careers, or, you know, in addition to the regular bathrooms. Any existing procedure that we have to protect students from food allergies would remain the same. That wouldn't change at all. And if we are in a remote or a hybrid situation, we would run the same program that we just ran when we had school remotely, where families that request it would have access to meals being delivered. Next slide, please.
Okay, I think it's my turn now. So
Meg, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear. Yeah.
As previously mentioned, there may be some times where the choice will not be ours, and we may need to move to an alternate learning model. That may be due to spikes in cases in our area, and the need to address those. So the first model that I'm going to share with you is moving 100% remote learning. And the first thing I'd like to talk about with this is to clarify that what we did during the spring was remote learning, but it was emergency remote learning. And what we would see if we need to go to this model moving forward will look different. There will be more time to plan for that. Our teachers will have more professional development, and we will have learned from our previous experiences. So according to the state guidelines, we would need to move to remote learning if the capital region is no longer in phase 4, and or if the daily infection rate reaches 9% using a 7-day average. There may also be some district-specific situations that might require it if there are issues with cases within the district. Remote learning will include daily schedules, daily or weekly schedules, where times will be outlined for instructional engagement, including any teletherapy needs that are associated for our students. The remote learning opportunities will include a combination of synchronous and asynchronous instruction using Google Classroom. Daily attendance will be taken and recorded. Faculty and staff will be reporting to work in person to deliver that instruction and those services. And you can see at the bottom what the daily instructional engagement expectations would be. For students in grades K through 6, we approximate 3 hours daily. And for grades 7 through 12, we approximate 4 hours daily. Students may find additional support and opportunities added based on need and desire. The other model that needed to be included in all school districts' plans was the hybrid model. As Lynn specified before, our district can fit everyone. So the question of why would our district move to a hybrid model is different. For many districts, they're proposing hybrid models because they're not able to fit all of their students in their buildings while meeting all of the guidelines related to physical distancing. It could happen due to, it may be implemented by the state ed or the governor. There may be a mandate related to capacity other than what has been defined now. And there may also be a school-related quarantine issue that needs to have us changing our locations. In the hybrid model, it would be similar to what you're seeing in the EASIN, combination of in-person instruction and remote learning. How that looks and where those cohorts are would be determined on our need, on what was causing that hybrid to take place. So what you see at the bottom is an example of what it could be. It doesn't mean that is the only option for hybrid. Students would be prioritized as they were previously defined, our youngest students and our targeted students, and we would have to make sure that we were doing the model to meet the need. Students would be provided with daily and weekly schedules, again, to outline their times for instruction. There would be an every other day rotation of in-person and remote, with certain groups being prioritized for daily in-person learning. And we would do that to the greatest extent possible. And again, daily attendance would be taken whether the student is in person or remote. Every day, attendance will be taken. Mike, is this looking?
Yeah, you could.
I'll do this. So across all learning models, safety measures, health checks, hygiene, cleaning, and disinfecting will be happening. So regardless if there are people in the school, these things will be happening, and many of these have already been set up. And I will pass it over to Mike to talk a little bit about what he's been doing with his subgroup.
Okay, so as we mentioned before, students will be required to wear masks, and certainly we would work in scheduled mask break times. Obviously, they would not have to wear masks when eating meals. The Department of Health has said that face shields alone are not acceptable. So if a student is going to wear a face shield or a staff member is going to wear a face shield, they would also have to wear a mask. Having said that, there are certainly going to be situations where students may have a medical issue where they cannot tolerate a mask, and we would deal with that on a case-by-case basis as needed, just making sure that social distancing is followed. And for wearing a mask and various other hygiene issues, through a combination of signage around the district, through a combination of online resources, and through a combination of in-class age-appropriate activities for students, we will be instructing them as to the proper way to wear a mask, as well as various other issues that they're going to be faced with when they come back to school. Next slide, please. For health checks in each building, we've set up a system. At the elementary school, we're purchasing the touchless thermometers. They're going to be mounted on the wall. So at the elementary school, when students come into the building, they would go through, and there will be 2 touchless thermometers at the entrance of each cluster, supervised by a staff member. So that would be a combination for them, their attendants taking temperature check. We would get 2 at a time into the cluster. We wanted to set it up that way to avoid a bottleneck out at the main entrance of the school, especially as it starts to get cold out. There would be another thermometer at the main entrance, not for students, but for visitors or whatever the case may be, stopping, out at the main entrance. At the high school, we would have 2 thermometers coming in the main entrance, 2 coming in the bus entrance in the back, and 1 at the gym. Again, supervised by a staff member at each area. Students with a temperature over 100 or that develop symptoms during school hours with no other explanation for them would be sent to the school health office for an assessment. And, the health offices will be set up such that one room would be for treating the normal issues that happen during the school day, and another separate area would be set up as a quarantine area. And I just want to point out, there are many other procedures and protocols, in terms of if we have a case or something like that, that need to be worked into the system, a tremendous amount of detail beyond what we're putting here. And that is in the process. For students, there would be a screening questionnaire. Similar to what you filled out. We're going to send that out to parents every 2 weeks. The guidance recommended periodic health screenings. So every 2 weeks, families would have to answer questions related to if they unknowingly had close contact with somebody that had COVID-19 or traveled to one of the designated areas. And that will go out every 2 weeks. 1, because it's very important. 2, because we want to keep reminding families, that we need to know, very important that we need to know that information. And it's always changing. Matt Hull and Dane Davis have done a great job setting up a screening application for us. We go to the website, and as part of that, it automatically goes and pulls in the latest information from the CDC as far as symptoms, states that, are on the travel advisory list. So that's updated and current. And we would have a staff member in each building whose job would be to monitor that information as far as anybody that did not get checked and follow through with that or didn't complete the health screening. For staff, we're asking staff members to complete the screening questionnaire daily at home before they come to school and self-screen. And again, we would have a staff member that's monitoring anybody that's not on that list and following up with people that have not performed their own self-screening. And a similar process for contractors, vendors, we'll have signage at the door, with a website where they can go to and basically do the health screening, temperature at the entrance, and show us on their phone that they were allowed to come into the building. And if that wasn't an option, we would still have a paper copy where they could do it that way as well. Next slide, please. Again, as I said before, there's going to be quite an effort to use a combination of not only signage, but online resources, age-appropriate activities to teach students things that we take for granted, how to wash your hands, proper hand hygiene, how important it is to wash your hands in certain circumstances, respiratory hygiene. You've got a number of different examples in here. And we'll work that into, I'm sure teachers will work this into classroom activities. And we've purchased, quite a bit of signage to put around the district to help educate our students and staff as to safe hygiene protocols and procedures. Next slide, please. For cleaning and disinfecting, we're going to increase staffing to the school hours, and that will probably look something like, moving up the night cleaner schedule, so they're starting earlier in the day, potentially adding a cleaner, depending on what exactly our situation is going to be in the fall. And we have an outside contractor that's going to be walking through the buildings next week and giving us a quote as to what that would look like in the event that we choose to go that route to supplement our cleaning. The bottom line is to make sure that cleaning and disinfecting is coordinated with the school schedule so that after students are in an area, those areas are cleaned and disinfected. Certainly high-risk areas like the nurse's office, the restroom, and the cafeteria are very important. The cafeteria, and again, all of this will be dependent on the ultimate schedules that are determined upon in terms of the time frame that students are in these areas. But we would need to make sure that we have 8 to 10 minutes between lunch sessions so that our cleaning crew can get in there and clean and disinfect the cafeteria between groups. Cleaning and disinfection supplies will be provided to faculty and staff for shared and frequently touched surfaces so that everybody has the capability to on-the-spot quick cleaning for high-touch surfaces that may change depending on what you're doing in your classroom, but light switches and things like door handles, things like that, just to help make sure we're covering our bases and keeping the building clean and disinfected throughout the day. For our facilities, as I showed before with the pictures, our learning spaces and cafeterias are in the process of being reorganized to allow for social distancing. We're installing touch-free amenities. We will increase our water bottle refilling stations, touchless soap and paper towel dispensers, touchless hand sanitizing stations as much as possible. We have adequate code required ventilation now. We are looking into various options to improve that. one of which is using potentially UV lighting in our unit ventilators in each of our rooms, maybe standalone air purifiers. But we're looking into various options to hopefully improve upon that as we get closer to the school year. Potentially even looking into an energy performance contract where we do, quite a significant overhaul of our air ventilation. Rick Clothier and I sat in on a presentation this morning and got a lot of good ideas on potential ways to improve our air filtration system. Drinking fountains, we don't have many of them in this building, but drinking fountains with no bottle filling station. There's a couple down in the basement. I think there might be a couple others. I'm not exactly sure. But those have to be closed off. The only drinking fountain stations that will be open are bottle filling stations. We'll make sure our water lines are flushed prior to the start of school. And New York State Education Department approved physical barriers will need to be installed in various places, high traffic areas, along counters in main offices, potentially between, beds and nurses' offices. So we need to identify those areas and make sure that's taken care of as well. I say NYSERD approved physical barriers because we can't just go out and buy a bunch of plexiglass. We have to make sure that we're using non-flammable materials, and we actually have to get that approved by the state before we install those. Thank you.
So regardless of the learning model that we will be in throughout the year, there are some components for attendance and engagement and grading that will remain. We have an existing Board of Education attendance policy, which the district will continue to follow. Student attendance will be taken and recorded every day, regardless of the instruction being provided remotely or in person. In addition to daily attendance, but also separate, staff will monitor student engagement and learning. The district will communicate and use multiple interventions when students are not attending and or engaging in learning. Grading practices will be designed with the intent of staying consistent through the 2020-21 school year, regardless of any transitions within the learning environment that are needed. They'll follow a standards-based framework, which is designed to provide direct feedback regarding a student's mastery of course content. And the practices will be developed with building level decisions and will be defined and shared by the principals in collaboration with the building level shared decision-making bodies.
Thank you, Megan. And before I go ahead, I'd like to thank the parents and teachers and counselors that participated in our subgroup. I co-facilitated with Jamie Bear, and I'm sure she will echo those sentiments as well. With folks from New York State, they've asked us to prioritize the social emotional well-being of all students as well as staff as we re-enter, as Megan had said, in any capacity. We do this by making resources and referrals available that address mental health, behavioral, and social emotional needs. These can vary from very general, from how to talk to your kids about COVID and re-entry, to very individualized counseling support. Also, our building level student support teams will work to identify and support students having transition difficulties. Meeting with kids and families ahead of time, surveying parents as to what their students' needs are, connecting with teachers between grade levels, and so on. We also plan to support students via a common screening tool, K-12. Additionally, we plan to provide professional development support for staff before returning to school, addressing items such as how to talk to kids about this, how to support kids, items in trauma-informed environment, and Amy?
Okay, I guess I'm up, right, Ken?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Well, before I get to my part of the slide, I just want to first say that we're flexible and we're approachable. We're all in this together. Uncharted waters, we're all in this together. We're going to continue to work with our families and providers, administrators, and teachers to make sure we do everything we can for our students, especially those with students with disabilities. I really have appreciated the open communication and the open dialogue with our families, and I want to continue that. And I know our team wants to continue that. That open dialogue is crucial as we continue the next phases. So before, writing up the plan, we got input from parents, steering committee members, regional CSE chairs, special ed attorney, interventionist teachers. We are going to follow programs and services and accommodations on IEPs. We're going to prioritize in-person instruction for students with disabilities in a special class program, as well as students who were adversely impacted from remote learning, either academically and/or social emotionally. For situations where a remote situation has to occur for one reason or another, they will have teletherapy services provided with the flexibility and groupings, frequency and duration in collaboration and input from our parents. CSE has worked very hard together during all those Google Meets that we conducted during COVID closure, and we determined compensatory services due to COVID closure, and we're going to be delivering these services this summer and in the fall. Case managers are going to reach out to families and discuss how services will be delivered to their child prior to the beginning of the school year. And we are requesting every 2 weeks minimally that we also reach out and we track and we discuss with parents how students are doing, how their child's doing, and then what we're seeing in the academic setting. So once again, I just appreciate the teamwork, and we are open to speaking with parents. Many of you have reached out to me already, and just continue to reach out to me and case managers and providers, and we're in this together and we're going to work through this.
Thank you all. I really appreciate that update. It was truly a group effort, and you gave a lot of great information. So before we move forward, I just want to go over a couple of the frequently asked questions. One of them that we didn't touch on in the presentation is athletics. And many of you know, if your children are in our athletic system, that sports right now are not prohibited. And so we're waiting to see how that goes, but I believe they're probably waiting on the governor as well. They have delayed the start of fall sports right now till September 21st, and they have shared a condensed season plan should our fall sports occur as planned. The district has reviewed roadmaps for a return of our athletics, and we have a lot of guidance from our state NISVA organization, from New York State Department of Health, and our CDC to begin preparations. And I want to just give a big shout out to the director of athletics, because he's been really staying on top of this and making sure all the coaches and teachers and administrators and myself are just up to date on how things are going. And I believe when we can return to any type of athletics, that we will be completely prepared. Another question is co-curricular and extracurricular activities. Right now, our priority is to get back to school with our core instruction and our day-to-day schedule. So this is not off the table by any means. We want to just see how this phase-in goes. And then for phase 3, we would really want to start talking to the Board of Education and obviously the principals about how to get this going. Right now, with busing, we're not even sure we're going to be able to get into period 10, but we're going to be reassessing that every single week as far as the needs of the students. And we hope we can get that up and running at phase 3. As I did say, our facilities do meet our New York State guidelines to support a full reentry when we are ready, and when our ease in phase 1, 2, and 3 have shown that we are ready to, that we've prepared, that we've practiced, and that not only the students and the staff have had time to adjust to the professional development and what will happen should we have to pivot in or pivot out, but that also that every other day from this first month really allows some populations of students to get ready for what it would look like, what it would feel like, and the parents as well. So we've got a lot of work to do around that item. And our Lake George Central School Districts in grade 5 and 6, who will be on the every other day for the first 2.5 weeks, are they on the target list if their parents are essential workers? That was one of the questions that came up. And right now, the New York State education regulations do not say that, but we can be talking about that. But right now, talking with my other CSO groups, that is not a regulation that we're looking to implement in phase 1 or 2. And mostly because that is a pretty short amount of time. And then the discussion topic that I would I would like to talk to the board about and get your feedback with the leadership team here is, and you'll see a lot of questions about really, we first want to say that we're not crazy about the opt-out language, but that is the language that is being used right now in our state around children that cannot come or our most vulnerable population. And we do have, we have it in our plan that would be either a synchronous or an asynchronous. There would be virtual participation, but we have not really outlined that. And some feedback of just sharing the plan out with the steering committee in recent days, and then having people look over the PowerPoint presentation. You'll see some themes about what does that look like. Some other school districts have been able to just nail that down at the elementary school or the junior, senior high school. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of planning and preparation for our teachers. And I just wanted to really talk about your feelings, because I'm sure being out in the community, that is a theme that's coming up. Like, if I want to make the decision to be 100% remote, what does that look like, so that I can make that decision? And obviously, there's already people who have told us they can't come back because they're in that vulnerable population. And it was an area that we met consensus on, but I think that the details of it, the parents are feeling a little uneasy because we haven't spelled it out. But so I'd like to put that out there for the discussion.
We're going to need to mute and unmute as we go through. So let's just be methodical. If somebody has a point to make, to raise their hand, and I'll acknowledge them, and we'll give them a moment to get their audio working. But thank you, Lynn, and thank you everyone who presented. This is a lot of information. This is all new. It's a lot to absorb, but it gives us that first step of understanding where we are and a structure that we can latch onto, which we're all very grateful for. And Jamie, I just want to thank you, especially for that message of reassurance and support. I think that it's important to all of us that we're taking care of one another and we're partnering together to do all of this. So that means taking care of our students, but their families. And I think I noticed we have over 130 community members tuning in here to listen. So this is obviously at the forefront of everyone's concern. And we want to take care of staff members too. And it's really important that our faculty and staff feel cared for in this environment. So with that, let's go ahead and start with any questions or comments folks have regarding the presentation itself, and then we'll get into the conversation about the virtual participation.
Also wanted to mention to everyone who's watching that these are the highlights of our plan. This plan is there are pages and pages and pages that go into great detail, and these were the real highlights that we wanted our community, our students, our staff, our parents to see, because we knew after getting this feedback back from our steering committee and knowing that the educators and the leaders are doing this work, that these are the things that you really wanted to hear about. So this is not this is not the whole plan. The whole plan has to be submitted tomorrow, but these are the big pillars and priorities we wanted to highlight. So thanks.
Great. And then also a reminder, have been getting questions at the email designated, and community members, please keep them coming. We're categorizing those and we'll be addressing those after the board discussion. Open the floor.
I have a question. This is kind of a specific question, but with regard to the air filtration, Mike, you were saying that like currently it's adequate and you're looking at ways to improve it. Is it adequate while the weather is good as well as like in the winter when we have to close things down? It was just a thought that I had. I didn't know if that was more related to being able to open windows and let fresh air in.
No, it's just, there's, I don't know the exact number, Rick would know, but it has to do with how much cubic feet of air your system turns over on a regular basis, and we're all set as far as that goes. We're just looking for ways to make it better.
Well, since we're on mic, throughout your presentation, you talked about reconfiguration of almost every space that's here. And that brings up obviously storage issues. I'm assuming that's a pretty huge issue, and how are you addressing that?
So what we're looking at right now is renting their 52-foot trailers and parking them at the Route 9 parking lot by the soccer field at the elementary school, or something along those lines. If not that, purchasing a storage shed. We haven't decided yet, but those are the options that we're looking at. But definitely we're going to need off-site storage. We just don't have it in our buildings.
Is there any ability through the state to do something on a state contract or for stuff like that?
We can certainly look into that.
I'm just curious. I have no idea. So, thank you.
Yeah.
I've got a question, and then Janine, is that all right? Can Lynn or someone on the committee talk a little bit in detail about the rationale for who's coming back to school each day versus the people who are alternating in the beginning?
When we originally started the discussion, I think there were some assumptions, which we've all been there, of assumptions like, well, we can fit everyone, let's bring everybody back. And again, as the superintendent, listening to the subcommittees and, being in the committees, in and out of both these committees, as well as the CSO committees and Department of Health, capacity was one item. So really, we looked with the group. At first, we started off when I kind of said, I don't know if that is the most cautious way to start out. And then looking again, we've been sharing with all the regional districts on how we're going to do this. And so most districts were prioritizing their youngest children who really cannot be connected to their computer for hours at a time or self-manage or organize. So at first I had come out and said, what about K through 3? And as the district leaders and the TOSAs got together, we really said, we really think we should include 4, that the ages of, 10, 11, 12, which would be 5th and 6th graders, they're kind of like the seniors, juniors and seniors. They know the program. They know they would be the eldest of the elementary school. And if you look at this too, as the regulations came out, we sifted through the 145 pages. At first, we thought we were going to just need to do this for the district, but really in looking at this to prepare all students, we really broke it down into what are we going to do if we have to pivot out and pivot in and prepare for full entry at the elementary school, and how would we do that at the junior senior high school. So we took the youngest in each school so that we would reduce capacity to try and really practice all the things we just went over around the temperature checks and the screening, and then at least have some of our students practice what's it going to look like when we're out and what it's going to look like when we're in. But it really allows us to ease in and practice to be prepared. A lot of schools, not a lot, but everybody's doing something a little bit different. But the schools that are doing a K-6 they're having a hybrid until the guidelines are lifted, 7/12. And I thought, this is in my opinion, the safest way to ease in, instead of bringing everybody back to figure out hallways and figure out, if we have a case, how that's going to work. So the reduced capacity and the ease in, phase in, to me was the most responsible and cautious way to get us to 100%. And I would, because I'm the person who really has to take responsibility ultimately for this, that I could say, we're going to practice. I'm going to be out in the hallways. The principals will be doing the same, and we'll be able to say with 100% certainty that the reduced capacity has helped us prepare.
Well, thank you. I know a lot of effort went into that, and a lot of thought of, are we being cautious enough? Are we being overly cautious? And, all of that input gathering together to come to this. Thank you for that work.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was a group team effort, and we weren't always in agreement. I will say that, but we came to consensus that we could all live with this decision.
Well, that's how good job.
Okay, well, I tend to come from everything that I look at from a student's perspective, in terms of how I feel all of this the impact that it will have on our students as a whole across the board. And it was hard to look at a wonderful presentation, very well done, without just feeling absolute heartbreak, just devastation, being a classroom teacher myself. So it prompted me to focus on a couple things. To me, my perspective is that no matter who the student is, the level of anxiety for students coming back in the fall is going to be heightened because of so many reasons for each individual student. And I do really appreciate the information that was shared on the slide having to do with social emotional learning in terms of the support as a district that will be offered to our students. I know Lake George has always been committed to that. But this is something that's going to put our students at a totally different level of anxiety. And so there are just a couple things that I wanted to call attention to, because it's the little things in a student's life, daily life, that make a big difference. And a lot of times as educators, we forget those little things. And so there were a couple of things that I just wanted to mention. First of all, in one of the slides, we mentioned encouraging people to stay home when they are sick. That's including students and staff. I can't highlight that enough, and that also needs to be encouraged to the students from the teachers. We have a lot of high-performing students in this district who take their academic experiences very seriously. As a teacher, I've had students absolutely refuse to stay home when they were ill because they took their schoolwork very seriously and they didn't want the fear of falling behind or having their grades affected. That's a regular thing that I've seen in the classroom, and I think that our faculty and staff have to be very aware of the policies in terms of making up work, et cetera, and we really have to encourage the significance of staying home. That seems little, but also little things like no lockers, no cubbies. That can be very stressful to students. I know it sounds silly, but just carrying books from place to place can become a little thing that becomes stressful, and we have to think about that in terms of planning, et cetera, for classes. The other thing is that I don't know what the state has decided yet with state level exams. I'm hoping that information will be shared along with the new information from the state in terms of how we're going to open or not, even with all these wonderful ideas and plans. But regardless of that, this is a historic experience that our students are going through. And I would like to encourage our school to think about district activities that our faculty and staff can do with our students to help decrease anxiety levels. So I don't know, maybe putting a challenge out there to take a time when maybe state exams aren't necessarily the main focus for our students, but helping them through this experience in the classrooms by doing some, I don't know, innovative instruction, et cetera, in this time of COVID. So I know those were very general. I don't know, those were just comments that I had.
Go ahead, Lynn. My question again is to you, Mike. Firstly, during school closure, you and everyone who was involved did such a great job making sure that meals were still provided to students and families, especially that were in need. But I'm concerned when everything is back business as much as usual as possible in school. Is that going to be a real problem to deal with in terms of continuing to do that with people that need to have their meals delivered?
I don't think so. I feel like we had good practice at that. I think the main thing it would just be making sure that we have dedicated staff at that point in the day to make the deliveries. I think that will be the main issue.
Yeah, I just thinking with kids there and reading about all of the cleaning that's expected between cafeteria, phases. That's a lot of people.
Are you talking about in terms of our ability to be able to clean it, or?
No, to have the actual persons available that aren't involved in other things when the students are here.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we've
to actually deliver food to the needed ones.
I'm hoping we'd be able to use at that point in the day, timing wise, it should work out where we have some transportation staff that would be available to do that.
Okay.
If not, we'll have to get somebody.
And I just have one more thing. This is kind of not really related, but sort of. The bus garage has people that are labeled as cleaners, right? Exactly. But are they able to be transferred into this building or the elementary school to, if we need? Because I know that we were looking at hiring an additional custodian, correct?
Yes, which we're still seriously considering. We don't want to be in a position where we're kind of waiting to see what the governor says next week. We don't want to be in a position where we're hiring somebody and then telling them they don't have a job. So
yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, but to my previous question, would someone who is a cleaner at the bus garage be able to be transferred into, or does that require something different?
No, they could be.
Okay.
We could
Just
use
curious.
staff here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kim, go ahead.
I don't want to speak out of turn if this is an opportunity for just board members. I don't want to intervene. But if that's okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to address and acknowledge what Mrs. Bieber was talking about our students and their levels of anxiety. And, I want to say how much our group really did prioritize the anxiety levels and recognizing that students who are coming in from this closure are coming in from all different places, and we need to be prepared for every student who walks through the door because we don't know what they've experienced and we don't know what their anxiety levels are. And we can take that temperature from their parents via surveys and what last year's teachers have to report on those students. But one thing I think we need to address also as a faculty, as staff, is how do we mitigate those fear-based kind of safety language. It is important that our students stay home when they don't feel well, but we also need to recognize that there's a great deal of concern from these students and fear for some. What it's going to be like when they come back, and if I do get sick, and what if I do bring home? So to make sure that we're addressing that with some common language for kids that avoids any kind of fear-based messages. So that we are addressing that, we are aware of that, and we recognize that staying home is important when you're ill. I think the anxiety of the unknown is also a major issue for these kids. I think that the phase-in process is really addressing that anxiety, not just jumping right back into school. That's having that ease into this. Going to get to know, they may see, their familiar faces, and that will really put them at ease without putting the full weight of immediate jump back into academics. Those first few days too, as is recommended by New York State, will be to spend that time really focusing on relationship building and establishing that connectedness. Mrs. Bieber, this is where I really thought what you said was a great idea, is really making that, it's one of the trauma-informed principles, is establishing connectedness and that sense of belonging with your group. So doing something very, very large would be great, and focusing on that relationship building. And that's all going to be part of the professional development that the staff will participate in before we return. We also know that high performers so have that specific level of anxiety when they're out. So I think that is an indicator to us that we need to prioritize when they are out. How are we really making them part of the classroom, and how are we really making them, bringing them into the classroom as much as possible while they remain out for whatever reason, whether it's family safety or personal safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Okay.
Tricia, can I jump in a minute?
Yes, please.
There was a question, as well as some things and other questions on the emails, and I think there needs to be some clarification of some terms that we as educators use, and a lot of times people don't know what they mean, and that's asynchronous versus synchronous versus live streaming. Synchronous is where the kids are independent, given the material to work on, a video, an assignment, and they work at it at their own pace, at their own time. Synchronous is what we're doing right now. We're having two-way conversations. It may just be one-on-one meets. It could be small groups of students with a teacher, or just small groups of students, but it's a live two-way communication. And it could be if a teacher chose to do a lecture or a lesson in this modality. The third thing that a lot of schools are using the word is live streaming. And live streaming is neither of those. Live streaming is a camera set up in a classroom on a board, say, a blackboard, and it's a one-way communication. So the student can see it, but there's no two-way communication back and forth from the student to the teacher or student to a student if it's set up that way. So it's just like the student's kind of non-existent, but they're watching it. But it's a live time watching versus asynchronous, which would be anytime watching. So I thought that would be helpful, especially as you move in, not that I'm rushing, but as you go into discussions, just to make sure that that's clarified, because there has been a few comments in the emails that I've been receiving. I wanted to just set that straight.
Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, Rosemary.
I guess I come from the perspective as the former director of guidance here, and hope that all the details that you're talking about is being discussed with both the elementary and the high school, because having reduced class sizes affects how many sections you have of each course. And that all, is actually being done now. And hopefully you have involvement with the guidance office, and hopefully they know all those details so that they can incorporate that in the schedule, because soon, as it is almost August 1st, teachers will be looking for their schedules, and students then after. I hope that teachers and parents can be patient with that, because these are all new things that are going to change the schedule, definitely. So those details are so important to communicate. Secondly, I just think that working in this district with the faculty as long as I have, I can tell you firsthand that the majority of our faculty, very supportive, very positive, have exceptional ideas and very creative. And I know whenever I have approached teachers with a problem and saying, what do we do? They, surprise me with what they come up with. So I hope that we give the faculty and staff the opportunity to share and discuss what they do, because some of them have exceptional programs and ways to instruct students and can help others who may struggle with it. So I just hope that there is an opportunity for development within our district so that the teachers can share that, and we give them, empower them to, that we're going to listen to them and, look to them for their ideas too. It's very important. And those are two things I had. Excellent presentation, by the way.
Yeah, I think. So, I think that everything you just said, I completely agree with. That's why our steering committee was so big. That's why the principals have been talking with their shared decision-making bodies. The challenge that folks need to understand is this timeline. We've never in education, I don't think, ever been put up against this type of timeline. And so I have no doubt if I asked any teacher to do what was good for kids, they're going to say, where do I sign up? And that's what they do here. I think that what you're going to see from the questions is, as a parent, you send your heart and soul right now in the middle of a pandemic situation. They want to know specifics. And so in some of these situations, we don't have all those specifics. We were asked to give them in our cleaning and our transportation. But the unfortunate thing is right now, we've got to make some decisions. This plan can be changed. It's going to be a kind of living, breathing document, but for parents who have immune compromised children, or they have immune compromised adults at home, they want to know what this is going to look like and have that assurance. So, I did share for you guys, and I shared it to the leadership team, one of the bigger districts who has so many people who can just, work around the clock to do this. We don't have that. We don't, we're a smaller district, but, they came to they had some complaints around, they were going all in with the K-6 and they've been on the news. And I think they had to kind of pivot a little and say, okay, we've really got to define that. If the state's saying that we have to give an offer, we have to offer a 100% remote, what's that going to look like? And we just have to decide that at some point, because the parents we're asking parents to sign on to us and tell us what they want to do by the 10th. And I don't want them not to come back, because we haven't, we've done that for the hybrid. If we have to go hybrid, we've done that for 100% remote. But if I'm one of those parents, even if it's a handful, I want to know what it's going to look like for my child at home if I have to work. And, will it be synchronous? Will it be not synchronous? So, unfortunately the plan is due tomorrow. So we've got to just have some discussions around what our core tenets of that will be for an elementary student in middle school. We haven't really been able to nail that down. We kind of have a broad statement about but it could mean a lot to different people. Does that mean if I go 100% remote with my child, am I going to come to the classroom teacher and are we going to design something individually? Or is it going to be K3 looks like this, 4, 5, 6 looks like this, 7, 8 looks like this? I don't know. But I know they're asking, and I think that it's incumbent upon us to answer, because unfortunately we do not have the gift of time right now.
Yep. I'd just like to echo, thank you, Rosemary, because that was one of the things that I was going to ask, is the level of the agency that we're getting from teachers to, advocate for themselves, their departments and so forth. But we do know that we have not only the teachers union, but we also have other unions that, we are in a time where everybody's being asked to do something a little bit different than what they originally went into their contracts with. Can you talk a little bit about union conversations, and has that ramped up?
Great question. We had Amy Baker, who's the LGEA president, on one of our subcommittees, or our K-12 steering committee. And we also had Bonnie, who is the curriculum coordinator for the junior senior high school. And also she's on the executive committee. Bonnie, are you the vice president?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and she's the vice president. So she says she wears many hats. So they had representation on the committee, and I think Brian too was on a subcommittee, and he's also the vice president at the elementary school. So, and then we had teachers on the steering committee and the subcommittees. So they definitely had an input in what we're doing. I know that also I would say that Bonnie had mentioned she had sat on some NYSET webinars, and just like we're sitting on some advocacy webinars, and a question came up: can you require a teacher to live stream? And again, are we talking about live streaming, or are we talking about, I have a child at home and I'm sending them a Google Meet to be able to interact with them and have that virtual participation? And I thought that was a great point, because is that changing things for teachers? And just so you know, the advice that I got was, right now, yes, we can require that. Right now, it has been established as past practice because of March, March and April, May, June. We've been doing this. We've been, and they've been in people's homes virtually, and quite frankly, our kids have been in our homes virtually. And so while it might not be the most preferred, I think we need to nail down that definition of what we would expect for the virtual participation. I really think that that's what parents are asking of us, and I know we can do it. I just think if we had another week, it would be better.
Before you jump in, I just wanted to move that question to Mike as well, because we were talking a little bit about transportation, and I know they're a separate union and some of our custodians, and have there been more conversations with those unions? Oh, sorry. Okay. So the question is, have there been conversations with the other unions, the bus drivers and the cleaners, about, their contracts and anything different that is going on because of COVID?
No, I wouldn't say about anything different. I just would say that I've had nothing but a feeling of cooperation.
Nice.
And talking to Andy as far as transportation goes, when he was on my facilities committee, and mentioned that we might be able to work something out if need be, where we could have some help cleaning here.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of options are on the table, and I've just felt the spirit of cooperation so far.
Mm-hmm. That's really good to hear. Thank you. Janine, you were going to make a point there.
Oh, yeah. So back to Lynn, what you were talking about with the virtual experience, there's so many layers to that. We were having a discussion about that a couple of days ago. So I'm curious as to do we know from our own technical support department what types of equipment we have even available for teachers in terms of different types of virtual learning opportunities? And then also, I think if we go all remote, that's one situation. Oh gosh, I hope we don't have to do, nobody has to do that. But then also, if you look at students who are opting out for some reason to come back, I think it's going to be awfully hard to make cut and dry decisions there until we know how many students that is, the age level those students are. But I'm curious about, do most of the teachers in the district have document cameras that they can use to hook up to teach remotely if they're doing live notes and still want to be able to communicate with students, et cetera? So much of it'll just have to do with what technology we have available to our educators to most effectively share information.
Everything you brought up, we have spoken about, especially with Megan. Her, as we've moved through this conversation, and some of it has been over the last couple of days, even just by email, like, guys, these are the questions and the feedback that we're getting. And, as a teacher myself, I would want to just know, like, if we make a decision that we're going to ask, you're going to ask me and I'm going to ask my principals, and the principals are going to ask the teachers, that we're going to have core academics, through Google Meet or through WebEx, then at least then Megan and her team can say, what does that mean for us as far as technology, as right now we're about to go into a huge professional development mode after this meeting's over, but if you don't know what you don't know, it's like, well, am I going to be asked to do it sometimes or not? And I think, when we get to the comments, I think it'll be clear. They want to know too, that it's a time, unfortunately, that we've got to make some decisions, because I think if we leave here saying, well, we're going to leave it up to, whatever we decide by the end of August, I think we're going to be back here next week talking just about that, and that's okay. But unfortunately, I think people want to know if we're going to put a timeline on making decisions for parents. I think you've got to say what you think so that we can make a decision.
So that was one of my questions was, has live stream been talked about in the steering committees as an option? I know the synchronous and asynchronous was in the presentation, but the words live streaming was not. And I know quite a few of the questions regarding for students who are going to do for whatever reason for their own if they have immune compromised or a family member immune compromised or for whatever reason they can't come back and they will be completely remote while other kids are here. What will that look like for them? And is August 10th the deadline for letting the district know if that's what you're planning for your child? And
so that's that is in the bigger plan that we decided because, again, from a counseling standpoint and a transportation standpoint, like we really would like to know that live stream is what is being used almost like as a blanket statement for virtual access. And I don't believe that correct me if I'm wrong, Meg, but that live stream is not something that we've done. Live stream is when you Facebook Live. That doesn't give a lot of interaction. However, for example, tonight, there are people here that we are engaging in. They're looking at us. We can go back and forth. They can see what we're doing. They don't have to have their camera on. Some of them don't. So to me, what I believe that some of the parents are really asking for is a schedule for some of the younger kids so that they can get their work done. For some of the older kids, there's a school of thought of, I don't want to record my lessons. I'd rather have them right in there with me. So I'll send them a Google Meet. They can join us with the Google Classroom. You also have to think too, let's say we do go back to in person, there may be several times, even in 1 month, and I'm seeing some of these emails come in. What about when we travel for vacation? So there's students that might be away that last week and they thought everything was good. And lo and behold, their state that they traveled to comes up and they have to quarantine for 2 months. So having some type of virtual participation expectation, at least for maybe our core subjects, may be a good idea. If I know that as a teacher, then I'm going to be looking at what Megan's doing and saying, I better get to what she's doing. And then we also have our 2 PD days in the beginning of the year, and we are going to have those 2 half days, that orientation, so they can meet as teams. And then, we want to support people to be able to do this. If this is really our reality this year, the expectation I know this sounds crazy and this has not been discussed with the union, but we talk about we're in a place where we're going to do what's good for kids. And what if I'm the teacher? Like I talked to Tricia about this. There's been a lot of communication out there that subs are not coming. They're not coming. A lot of our subs we're going to talk about our famous Mr. Corsetti. He's like, I can't come here. And the people who come sometimes are retired. They look forward to doing this on the side. So if for some strange reason, I'm the science teacher and I have to be quarantined, but I feel fine, I go to Mr. Kokoza or I go to Mr. Conway and say, look, I know because of all the COVID and Family Medical Leave Act, and I don't have to take their time. And they what's good for kids is, can I interact with them at home? So maybe, that's that flexibility piece that's going to be crucial. And if the teachers that I know will be like, I want to keep that communication going. So there's so many situations in which we've got to nail down in the buildings, like Rosemary, the buildings will nail those things down as to how that's going to happen. But I think when we started the conversation, weeks ago, it was like, no, that's, we don't want to have that as a total option, but the reality is, it is an option for some. It's small. I don't think, we talked about bandwidth, oh my gosh, we have to discuss it, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that we're talking about a small population. But that's a population that we've got to answer some questions for. And we have really gone round and round about this, we just haven't come to really nailing it down, but we said we want to be able to have some virtual participation.
Well, kind of in regard to Ms. Bieber's comment about the technology and the amount of equipment and stuff, I know, Ms. Rutnick, during the all of this school closure, you've met almost on a daily basis or at least weekly with all the CSOs in the region through the BOCES and Mr. Dexter. Too much, no. I'm just curious, did it ever come up that districts could share like even presenting the same class that maybe a small group of seniors here or a small group of seniors in Warrensburg or Bolton or could, if they had better equipment than we had, or maybe we would have equipment. Did that ever come up in terms of sharing? I mean, we're geographically a large BOCES, but
so that absolutely did come up with some of our larger school districts or teachers who cannot come back, not at Lake George as much, but for the South Glens Falls folks and Saratoga, the CSOs absolutely talked about getting together with some of those teachers and they want to be back, but they can't be back, and starting a virtual or remote school so that they would sign up. They'd be our children, but they would sign up and we'd have a virtual K1 class or a 3-4. But I can tell you, unfortunately, those conversations have really been stalled because we are under such a timeline to get in. So if that happens, we would 100% sign on. And if parents and families and our team thought that was the best for kids, that would be fabulous. Getting back to our pillars and our priorities and our principles, that connection piece. I mean, I think we're the best for our kids. We love our kids. We know them, whether they're in first grade or fifth grade or sixth grade. And I can tell you that, there's such pride and connection that I will imagine a lot of the teachers will want to connect with their own kids rather than, but if this is a whole year item, it could be a different story,
Well, just maybe for people who are tuning in that might not know, when you say CSO or I say CSO, you're referring to Chief School Officer, which is the superintendent.
Correct.
Thanks, Lynn. Marianne.
Yeah, I want to note that I see the emphasis on attendance and engagement in the presentation, and that's great. I think that whatever we end up deciding to do remotely, we should really be maximizing engagement and whatever modality we use, and as is developmentally appropriate, we're trying to maximize that engagement. And knowing that anything can happen and we might be toggling between different remote some sort of, am I being heard? I had a lot of feedback for a second. Sorry. You're not, I can't hear me. I'm not getting you. I just muted you. Okay. Just knowing, I love that we're having an ease-in plan because it gives us that experience and it gives us that memory to be nimble if we need to be as things change, moving forward. But I do think that, whatever system we use to maximize engagement without, doubling the efforts of all the providers who are trying to, so in terms of teachers are teaching in classroom and then they're also having to do a whole separate other lift. Mm-hmm. And I think that if students are having, if things happen in such a way that students are they go on a vacation, they're out, and then they can come back in at some point, as much uniformity to those two platforms as we can match up, I think is best for all of those transitions, and so, I don't know developmentally all the different what that would look like and the different ages. But I'm getting that feedback again. I'm sorry. It's hard to hear my voice coming back at me.
Keep your headphones out while you're speaking. Don't have your headphones in.
Yeah, I muted you, Lynn.
Okay. That's okay. I think I lost my train of thought here. That's okay. I just think that you know, if we need to be nimble, I think that trying to I like the idea of if somebody is, you know, having a classroom, somebody's present in the classroom. If they can't be there, they're at home, they're still able to engage in the classroom setting rather than not being able to engage while they're watching something. That's just my opinion.
So
I'm gonna unmute myself.
All the time, almost like a live. When I say live. Like, so almost as if all the time there's a sort of a Google Meet platform going on, whether you're in the classroom or you're at home, so that whether you are one of the students who is continuously learning remotely, or if there's an alternating situation where some kids are here one day, some aren't. Is that what you're saying? For consistency in the work for the teachers?
So what you talk about, really, that will be up to the teacher. I think a big takeaway is the screen time. You know, if you have a child who's home, K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, you don't want them on the screen their whole day. So, you know, that would really be a consideration. That would be that professional development, that philosophy, that defining what we believe if you are 100% remote. I mean, that's up to the teacher discretion to say, okay, we're going to be doing this and we're going to give you some break time. You can do some things. We're going to come back and meet with you one-to-one. But that's that instructional coaching that we have experts in our school district on that. You know, teachers who already will do that, and we hope that they will, you know, work with Megan and her team to get that professional development done. But you know, I think capturing what Megan said, that we were in an emergency situation last spring and we are not there now. You know, we really want to plan for this and plan for it well. And I will give Megan an opportunity, you know, that we've had this conversation to talk about this from her perspective. And just to close out, like, there will be no ideal. There will be you know, when we talk about this, perfection is not the goal. This is not going to substitute any type of in-person teaching. You know, we know that's where we ultimately want to be for everyone. Unfortunately, we're not there, but we'd have to really decide what that's, you know, substantive and substantial learning is, and that access and that equity for those students who can't come in. We're just figuring that out.
I just like to point out that, you know, we are required by law to have equitable education for our students, but that doesn't mean equal. And this is a great example of how they're not going to get exactly the same thing, but we as a district are going to work very, very hard to identify and meet all of the needs of the students in our district. And I think that one of the things that needs to happen now that we have this structure as a touchstone is now is the opportunity to identify the students who would be in this category, and the students, the families, how it affects siblings and the whole unit. And families will have to make some decisions knowing this as a touchstone, communicate with us. But then also, and I would imagine you've already started to do this, identify which professionals we have within our district who are very well versed and proficient in creating virtual opportunities. And that will be so different for each developmental level. And I think that that's what you were mentioning. Maybe Megan can talk a little bit about. Were you just handing that off? So Megan, if you feel comfortable.
I can talk to some professional development that we have planned. We surveyed both staff and families at the end of our emergency remote learning to learn about that experience from all angles. And we've developed a set of professional development that really, I think, gets at what you just said, Tricia, about finding those ways to connect. And really, it's for all of our learning models. It's when we were originally planning them, it was with the intention of we didn't know yet where we would be, and we don't know if we'll be able to stay constant in our models throughout the year, and to really think about our instructional practices in a way that will allow for as much consistency in the learning practices if those environments end up changing. And it really focused on things such as engagement. We know that even coming back in person will look different. One of the things that Mr. Conway was really focused on is small group work. All of our instruction in our elementary schools centers around small group work. So even as we come back to in-person learning, we're going to need to think about our instructional practices and how we do small group work when we're 6 feet apart from each other. And so a lot of these practices that we'll be talking about during this professional development are to help support our instructional practices in all of these models. Specifically, if we're talking about for our students who are not able to return with us in person, I do believe there could be some practices that we will be talking about, some tools that we will be talking about that can also support that combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning for those students. And one other piece that came up that I should probably address, the question about the technology resources. We are a very fortunate district to have the resources that we have. Every student and every staff member has a district device, which allowed for everyone to participate during our emergency remote learning, and will continue to allow for that participation in any of the instructional models that we may end up finding ourselves in this coming year. As far as equipment that is in addition to those devices, currently our equipment is built on in-person instruction. We do not have, we have cameras built into our devices, but we do not have additional cameras that could be set up in the classroom or things like that. So I agree that finding out who of our students we're going to need to support remotely and what levels they're at and what needs they have will help us determine if there is additional equipment needed and where that is needed. And again, how we can use that equipment for the combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning.
Megan, thank you very much for that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, go ahead, Fran.
Yeah, just to echo what Megan just reiterated is, again, I don't think it's a simple all or nothing in regards to live streaming. Case in point, the constraints of this evening's meeting. Imagine our students 5 days a week having to sit in front of a computer screen with the technology issues that we're experiencing this evening. I think we need to prioritize when we do it and prioritize those focuses developmentally based on what grade levels it's appropriate, or even more so, what subjects it's appropriate for, when appropriate, teacher discretion. But I think it to be, and I would hesitate and pause for anyone to narrow the focus to be an all or not type of discussion. Best practice is that the teacher would decide when it's appropriate. And even in the teacher deciding when it's appropriate, it might not be the whole class. It might be a specific population within the class that would need that type of focused instruction through a live chat or a live feed or a live, fill in the blank. Additionally, I think it to be an overpromise if we were to say we were going to live stream all our classes all the time, and nor would we want to ever make a statement like that to anyone. We should never try to say that we're going to replicate what we do in the building at home digitally. Like that's not our purpose. That's not our goal. And I think there's a lot of misinformation about live streaming and what it would bring home to parents and students versus what it actually would benefit.
So to weigh in with the elementary school perspective, if I can, Megan shared, and we talked a little bit about that asynchronous and synchronous model. And for the parents who are listening in to try to get that $1 million question answered, I realize that some students will not be in the building at the start of the school year. And I understand and I respect that. So I know that we need to have a plan in place for those children. And right now we're talking about really what does that look like? And we have some experience with this in some regard. And some of you did a lot of work with your children, struggling through our Google Meets and using the platform of Google Classroom. And if you think about a combination of that, where we're going to be better than we were, I think that's kind of where we're at. And Fran mentioned having something streaming all the time. If we think about just good instruction, that's not how it works. We teach something, or we provide a mini lesson, and then kids go away and they do independent practice. They would never be sitting there in front of a screen all day. None of us would want that. After they do that practice, they come back, they get feedback from us, and then we provide some sort of measure or assessment of what they've done. And no matter what we do, we would still want to follow some sort of model like that. But to think that our kids would be sitting in front of the monitor all day, it's the last thing that we want. So I think we have a framework in place where at least our families can understand there's going to be some sort of a blend of that synchronous and asynchronous. But yeah, like all the schools out there, I meet with my principals groups. Nobody has a perfect plan. Even some of the schools that people think have a plan in place, they really haven't ironed it out yet. So I think we're having really good discussion with this tonight, and I do appreciate all the comments by the board and the fact that we have such great participation tonight. We will make this work for our kids.
Thanks so much, Mr. Conway. Any other board comments? All right. So Lynn, I'm going to turn it over to you and Bonnie in terms of addressing some of our community questions.
Okay. Let's make sure. So Bonnie, do you want to read the question out loud, and then if I can answer it, great, and if I can, or feel it's more appropriate to ask someone else, I will pass on the question. Let's see, Bonnie. Bonnie, you're on mute.
I'm coming. So many of the questions were about the virtual option. Are we going to offer it and what it will look like? And I think we just had a long discussion about that, that those details are being developed. Sounded, lots of different opinions, a balance. I've heard of balance between the two. I'm going to jump to the high school because there were several topics about scheduling. Not so much about I want this class or that class, but in terms of some of our population attend unique programs elsewhere, half-day programs, BOCES programs, New Visions, and how are we going to coordinate that? And the answer is yes. If we go to a hybrid model where there is coordination needed for the every other day approach, then we would be working our schedule with, say, BOCES that may be doing it every other day. So we wouldn't have our high school students on a remote day when BOCES is an in-person day. And there were several other things about if we go to hybrid, which required remote instruction or full remote, will there be schedules? In the spring, there was a schedule of topics to classes to focus on for that day to help students navigate their priorities that day. And the answer to that is yes, there will definitely be schedules where on this day you're going to focus on these classes. Times the teacher will be available for whether it be a synchronous lesson or office hours or small group requirements, or maybe just 5 kids coming in to do a small group. So those answers are yes, those schedules will be coming. Those are the building details that still are to be coming in the future.
Okay.
Quite a few questions about masks.
I'm going to, I think it just to be as offer a two-way communication. I really think it's important, even if we've already answered some of these questions, just to read them so that people feel heard. So I think we should just go down. So, I don't mind reading them. The virtual option. So these are under the virtual option. It is my understanding that the state requires each district to offer a distance learning option for families who choose it. I do not see this in the grand reopening. I love how they call it the grand reopening plan. At this time, as time is down to just over a month away, will we see this plan? Because we want to make arrangements. So I think we talked through that, and we're going to have to communicate that out. So we will now have to.
And Lynn, has there been any conversation about how you're going to identify those students?
Yes. So this is kind of the challenge, that the parents want to know what the plan is so that when we send out a survey, they will absolutely know if they're opting out. So I did share, we will do a Google survey to the parents to say, basically, we need to know your name. In the past, they've been kind of anonymous. What's your name? Are you thinking of opting out? Or if you're not thinking of opting out, are you going to take transportation? If you're going to take transportation, and a couple other items that we really need to know is, has there been any trauma or some things that you really need a social worker or one of our support staff to reach out to you? And then the principals will get those immediately and start working through that data. But what you'll hear here is, I need to know the plan so that I can decide if I'm going to opt out or 100% of remote or be here.
Right. And I think that we can probably get a gauge on those folks who, regardless of the plan, would need to be completely virtual. There would be a percentage that would be absolute with that, I think. And that would be an indicating mark for us.
Yes. And I have heard on that same communication string that if I really knew and felt assured about going back, that I think I would try it because they believe that they want to get their children back. So I think that, hoping this is the plan will build some confidence with what we're trying to do. Will accommodations be made to allow families who wish to keep their children home in the fall? Will those children be allowed to participate in virtual instruction, or will they be required to withdraw their children by homeschooling? No, no one will be required to sign their children up for homeschooling programs. We have an obligation for students who choose 100% remote to provide access to instruction. So if they choose not to go with what we decide for 100% remote or in-person or hybrid, then they would be asked to homeschool, because those would be our options. Same thing for the next question. Have you taken into consideration parents or caregivers' health issues as it pertains to children attending in-person instruction? And we haven't because we don't have that information, but we will. And that's going to, when we send out that more specific survey, asking for that information, do you need someone to reach out? We will find out more information. Under virtual, what is the plan of students and families who have elderly members in their household and children with weakened immune systems more susceptible to the virus? Will there be an option for them to participate at home? Yes, there will. Will parents have the option to keep children home for remote learning to protect them and their household? Yes. But we're hoping that if it's, if they see this plan and they have confidence, they will send them to us. Are you going to make accommodations for students who cannot return? Safety protocols. If someone in the community tests positive, what will be the next required step? And we have outlined all of that in our very comprehensive safety plan. However, I want to be crystal clear that the principals and the nurses have been working in lockstep with each other, and that information will go home as well as to what will happen if someone in the school community becomes sick. And we at the district level will also have a communication protocol with making sure that FERPA is adhered to, but we would send that out so people knew. Same thing. What's the protocol for local infection rates between 5 and 9% threshold? And we don't get to control that. I mean, when we hit the threshold, we either have to close, or if we're getting close to it, Department of Health communicates with us every day. So they would be giving us a heads up. We'd know that information if it starts trending upward. Childcare on remote days. So for days when students are supposed to do home orientation activities, but if your child goes to this district and the other parent is working, can the child go to the school on that day? This is going to be difficult for working parents to do every other day scenario. What is the solution? There will be kids there will, blah, 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 sorry, home, no one to watch them. So there's going to be kids home in 4th and 5th grade with no one to watch them. And that has come my way. And while I would love to be able to answer that, that's really a personal decision, and it's going to be the same if we pivot out and parents have to go to work, just like where we've been. So that's really a personal decision.
And can our school help in any way on a platform of connecting parents to one another, like a board, say, that's online? I could use some help on this day. Is there anybody, or making those pandemic micropods of assistance so that there's small groups of people? I know a lot of parents are doing that on their own, and anything that we could do to help facilitate that. Yeah.
Conversation with our PTSO to say that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. And then they can even have their own system like we do, with this group. We'll be happy to share that with them, the screening protocols. Under safety, temperature checks are great, but only detect when symptoms begin. Only a COVID test like the ones conducted at Warren County Health can show a positive result for asymptomatic persons that may be shedding the virus to other students. There's no mention of actual COVID testing. No, you're absolutely right. We are not going to do COVID testing if we really felt that someone was at risk, or that we would be suggesting immediately that they go to their own doctor. And we also have to be in constant contact with our Department of Health. So they would be checking up on them as well. So it's a pretty tight, because of the tracing that's going to be happening. The Warren County Department of Health and the nurses have been communicating with them constantly. And I also want to really just thank them. They have been wonderful, a wonderful support, both Faith and Carrie. Yep. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so let me just make a quick comment. I don't know if people realize, but probably one of the most well-respected scientific journals in the world just released, the Journal of American Medical Association, just released a study pertaining to the effectiveness of masks. So this is after months of data being collected. So you were talking about asymptomatic and concerns there. So what they found is, of course, we wear masks to help protect the other person. But JAMA has found that the mask also considerably cuts down on viral particles taken in. So it actually does protect you to the point where it can lower the amount of virus enough so that if you do come in contact with the virus, that you also will get a much lesser case, either asymptomatic or very, very mild symptoms. Don't get me wrong, that's not like woohoo, but just to put some people's minds at a little bit at ease too, that if we are consistent, if the kids can be as consistent as possible with their mask wearing and hand washing, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of a little more peace of mind too, in terms of asymptomatic infection, et cetera. So.
And so it's been some themes about who's going to enforce this. You know, are we going to have hall monitors? And so I can, you know, the principals are here. I think that's a good question for who will enforce if students don't wear a mask or refusal, or students consistently violate the social distancing rules.
Sure. So for us, it's all about procedures.
What do you do with the? Never mind. Sorry.
For us at the elementary level, it's all about procedures. And when we're talking about procedures, it's our classroom teachers that are the ones really that are teaching from day one, or actually before day one in this situation, what that looks like. And you need to continue to reinforce and have conversations with kids. And sometimes that means, you know, having conversations with kids, and moms and dads, or sometimes with Mr. Conway. But I think we run a structured building. Our teachers will do a wonderful job.
Thanks, Jim. Fran, did you want to also add?
So I just go back to the example of graduation and how our students, our seniors, performed and excelled at that ceremony in following our protocols and expectations. And just we set the expectation, and continually Lake George students exceed it. So I think we as the adults will model positive and appropriate and proactive behavior with masks and washing hands and socially distance, and we will set the example, and I know our students will exceed that. When they don't, then we're going to have to individually address that with those specific students and those families.
Okay, thank you. Someone did write, I don't know if we answered that correctly. What will be the procedure should someone in the school be tested positive? Mike?
The Department of Health has very detailed guidelines in the event that something like that happens, and we would follow those to the T. You know, that would include closing off the affected area, consulting with the local health department, opening outside doors and windows, and I'm reading from their guidance. So we have those policies and procedures in place.
Okay, the other questions under reentry planning. The phase-in period is only 2 days for K4 and 7-8. How is this gradual? And why are grades 4 and 8 and 7-8 excluded from the phased-in transition back to school? They are full-time in person and in person on day number 3, according to the chart. Anybody want to take that? I mean, we had originally talked about a week-long orientation, and so that got changed a little bit. I think, Bonnie, you might be able to talk just a little bit about reducing it to 2 days. Some of it, honestly, became so complicated with busing, and we tried snow days, and we tried a whole bunch of different items. And so if Bonnie or Megan, if you have anything else to add as to why we didn't do more than 2 days.
I think a lot of it was the transportation. And also the ongoing, I think part of this question is the K4 and 7-8 population of students will be full in person every day. Why aren't they every other day? So we prioritize the younger kids as well as 7-8. They are junior high kids. They are very contained in their clusters. The 7th grade population this spring lost all transition activities from 6th to 7th grade. So we were looking at reducing capacity in each building, but also then prioritizing who we felt should be there every day. And in terms of cutting the orientation from 4 days down to 2 days. A lot of it was logistics in terms of transportation.
And I do think it's important to realize that those first few days of school are not going to look the same as they have in the past. Again, going back to, it's a lot of procedures that students and staff need to become familiar with. And we're not plopping kids down and giving them running records in the first week of school. So things will look different. So I look at it as it's a reentry plan, that it is more gradual even over the first few days that kids are in person.
One of the questions around safety protocol is an excellent one, with knowing that people are going to be traveling before they come back to school, and it is really, will folks be tested prior, or will be screened really before they come back to school? I mean, we cannot ask that everybody be tested, and the state says, please don't do that, because we want to keep these testing kits for the folks who need them. But everyone will have to do the screening like you did today, and the screening will be available electronically. And as if you're dropping off children, you can grab a stack of also those papers. But everyone definitely will be asked to, before the beginning of school, have they traveled to those states? Do they have a temperature over 100? And are you around anyone who's sick? Are you feeling flu-like? But absolutely, there will be a process in place before we start school. Oh, this is an excellent question too. We definitely thought this would come up. Jim, I'm going to hand this one to you, because I know this was a really strong recommendation from the committee that he facilitated. And it's really about, would you discuss the decision to require students to wear masks in the high school or the elementary school when they're already socially distanced? To my knowledge, the CDC recommends masks or social distancing, but doesn't suggest that both need to be simultaneous. The wearing of masks all day may not support a positive mental health for students.
So first, the discussion of masks, and I'll kind of get at one of the other questions, I think that's somewhere later in there. Again, I'll come at this from the elementary school perspective. Students walking into the building, walking through the halls, we want everybody to be safe, our students and staff. So the expectation, just like when you walk into Stewart's, you're wearing your masks and we are physically distancing. Just because we're sitting in the classroom now that we're 6 feet apart, or in music or PE 12 feet apart, we felt as a staff to keep both as a committee, we felt to keep both our staff and students safe. Continuation of wearing masks would be helpful. Somebody asked about breaks, a mask break, and what does that look like? Well, one of the things that is encouraged is getting outside. We have the opportunity in all of our classrooms to be able to get outside on days. Even in the North Country, we do get a few sunny days here and there, where we can go out and physically distance well beyond 6 feet during an independent reading time or during an independent writing time, where kids are out there now, and instead of seated at their desks with a mask on, now that they're outside. We have tough kids in Lake George. We can do that when the weather is cold even. We do go out for recess, and we can physically distance and do some fun things at recess, whether it's kicking a soccer ball to somebody else with a mask off beyond 6 feet. So there are plenty of opportunities, but the committee did feel that just because there's a minimum requirement, that doesn't mean we have to follow the minimum if we have an opportunity to extend that. So again, I think procedures with any students, whether they're elementary students or secondary students, that social emotional piece is a big one, and making sure that kids feel safe will be my priority. And that understanding that knowing they're coming back and things will look different and feel different for us, reaching out to those students before the start of school and making those connections will be even more important this year than in the past. So hopefully that answers a little bit from our perspective.
It really does. Thank you. We definitely knew that question would come. We have a facilities question. We talked a lot about air quality, air control, and we are going to be in compliance and are in compliance. We've had our director of facilities look into that. They also asked about if we're going to have air conditioning in some of the buildings, and how MERV 13 filters, have they been provided where possible? And
so our unit ventilators can't accommodate a MERV 13 filter. That's the highest level filter. we can go as high as MERV 11, I believe, and I would have to double check that with Rick. But with the MERV 13, it actually would burn out the motor because of the extra air that's required to try and force through the filter. So that's why we're looking into some other options. We've talked about, it's a more expensive option, but putting a UV lighting system in our unit ventilators. So, you know, that's something that's very detailed and intricate and is being looked into. But I did learn today that MERV 13 filters are not an option for what we have here now.
We did learn that we cannot have or ask students to be bringing in their own hand sanitizers, which is kind of funny because before COVID-19, people were walking around with them on their backpacks. And but that right now is what the regulations are stating. There was just a question really that this kind of gets into the weeds, and this is what I have Mr. Conway and Mr. Kokoza are going to be working through, but mostly at the elementary school, you know, how students, if they're at lunch, how are they going to be handling their masks to remove it when they sit down to eat lunch? And then they're also expected to wash their hands. And we'll work with the kids on that. We will, I mean, I imagine we're going to have some really student-friendly videos with older students and their teachers and people that they know, and we'll make sure that we practice that, and I have a great deal of assurance that that will be happening. Safety on the bus.
Lynn, can I interrupt a minute?
Absolutely.
Jim answered the question about mask breaks at the elementary perspective. I did have a follow-up right away regarding that, and they would like the secondary to discuss what mask breaks will look like. So I'm going to have Fran unmute and discuss that, hopefully.
Thanks, Bonnie.
So the difference at the junior senior high school is that we are landlocked in the village. However, once Labor Day happens, we reclaim the village and the streets, and will encourage teachers and staff to have those mask breaks outside. We also could, unlike the elementary school, have those beautiful fields and playgrounds and recess. However, we do have 2 courtyards, and I emailed Mike early this morning, I think, or late last night, about utilizing the 2 courtyards that are inside the building. However, they are outside, and perhaps we can have some small groups in there as well. But we'll do the same at the elementary, that the elementary is going to be doing, with specific mask breaks throughout the day, because that's going to be needed.
Sorry. We received 53 questions from another parent. I am sorry, but some of them we've gone over. It does look like this is an elementary parent, and I really appreciate these questions. They're about art and music. There's too much for me to go through, but I would encourage, Mr. Conway has these questions, and if we can identify who it is, I'm going to ask them, Mr. Conway, to reach out and go over them with you, because a lot of them we can definitely answer, and they're in our plan. So when we do post our plan tomorrow, I would also really hope that you go in and look at them, because we've answered a lot of the questions.
Real briefly, Lynn.
Sure.
So please reach out to me, whoever that is. And just for others' sake, we have already figured out space for our specials. Some of them that really don't work in the classroom, an open classroom model such as music, but we need to space the kids. We have solutions, and we spent a lot of time talking about that. So please reach out, and we will be sharing that as well in the very near future.
Thanks, Jim. This is really for the junior, senior high school. I think folks are concerned about not using lockers for obvious reasons, and they just wanted to know if there's any assurances about how much the kids are going to be asked to carry from day to day, without, even in the elementary school without the cubbies, and in the junior, senior high school without the lockers. So if Fran or Jim wants to address that, I know you've talked about it.
So the beauty at the high school is that, and I hate to generalize, but very few students utilize their lockers. There are a few who do. My own children utilize their lockers. However, the vast majority do not. So the beauty is the past decade or so, we've moved away from the large textbooks, and students are not carrying around the large textbooks that we all grew up with in our backpacks. But if their backpacks are heavy or they feel it burdensome to be carrying around stuff, I know that they can identify a teacher where they can leave their stuff in a space, and be able to navigate the day around that. But I don't think it's going to be as much of an issue with the students not utilizing their lockers. However, I will say that as we transition to the winter, perhaps that's one of the things that we will reevaluate as students start to bring more and more stuff in. And depending on where we are with the pandemic and the use of lockers, perhaps that's one of the first things that we reevaluate.
Thanks,
at the elementary level, obviously we don't want kids congregating at the cubbies, and that was one of the main reasons. Fortunately, they all have chairs. Think about putting our coat on the back of a chair. And one of the things that we are going to be doing is getting, if you think about like a large milk crate that students will be able to kind of put things in there for their own storage close to their desk. Also, all of our kids have backpacks as well that some of the things that they store in it can be at their desk. So they may actually wind up being more responsible and not leaving things at school if your kids are anything like my son was back when he was an elementary level student.
Perfect. Childcare, Mr. Conway and I, had some really good discussion about this. We are going to try to move forward with the YMCA. I think, Jim, you might have told me, or Megan, it was like 20 students or so. So if the students are already in the building, we feel like that we could move forward with that. And the question really is, will there be aftercare for programs for working parents? So I didn't know if you'd made contact. It's only been a couple days, but.
So that's the only after-school daycare that our school has ever hosted. It's not run by the school. We provide the space for the YMCA. For those of you whose kids have participated in that, it's a great program. We'll have to relocate them to provide them with enough space. And procedurally, there will be some changes as far as the pickup from outside of the building and that type of thing. But we will try our best to provide and continue to provide that program. And if the YMCA is able to provide that program.
Perfect. As far as budget, yes, we have, we planned to make sure that we had the funding for backup supplies that we needed. And we also want to really thank our Wish-We BOCES, because together the superintendents realized that we were going to need all this material. So they created a COSER, which was approved by New York State Education Department. And that allows us, if we buy through BOCES, to also get aid back. So they have been really wonderful. So they have kind of stockpiled some things. And Mike has been wonderful from day one, getting out and making sure that we have, I believe he's worked with the principals on this, the signage and things that are really going to just be out there to support the message of social distancing and hygiene. There's some questions around thermometers, and that's going to come out with the building level communication as far as how we'll be taking temperatures. Contract tracing, when the school is notified that a student or employee has a self-quarantine due to being in contact with someone positive, will all students in that cohort be notified? Yes. And again, very strict guidelines. The Department of Health will be called immediately, and they will tell us what we need to do. Will children be able to keep water bottles at their desks?
Yes. And if we can get those filled up at home, that would be great, because we have a limited number of fountains. So that procedure will change a little bit, but kids will have water. We want them to have that at the desk. Mr. Varney talked a little bit about how the fountains will change, but we will we will make sure our kids are hydrated.
Okay. Fran, you concur?
We actually have multiple hydration stations at the high school. They were installed over the past couple of years. So yes, of course, students can have water at their desks and they can fill them up at the hydration station.
Thank you. This is a great question. Will families have the option of keeping their children home for at least the first few months or two until we see what happens with spikes? Pretty much regionally, we have decided that, and this will go out in the survey, that if you are choosing 100% remote for a variety of reasons, that we're going to be asking you either to do it by the marking period or quarters. So we are going to ask for a commitment. And this is really because we have so much work to do around scheduling, and 1 or 2 children can really take a whole classroom into a different space. So we're going to be asking for a commitment from those parents who do choose 100% remote. Yeah, we've answered a lot of these. Filtration. If all the professionals cannot be in the same room for this meeting, how do you expect to congregate children together? Tricia, I think I'll hand that one to you.
Very good. Well, I think this is, one of the things that we worked very hard to make sure that we could all be together and to model the Board of Education and the leadership of the school wearing masks and being here for an extended period of time, interacting with this digital platform, because it certainly helps us understand and requires the school to be ready to, if we can do it for the board, then we can do it for the school. And we can also, doing this helps us identify the limitations of technology. And, as you can see, we are all spaced out the way that is suitable. And we have invited other people in virtually, as we can do in a classroom as well. So I think that we're doing our best to model the best practices here. And also we want to have our own ease in. So we wouldn't start with the large number of people in one room. But Lynn, can you tell me what would be the most number of students in a classroom?
It really varies. Like Mike said, he has a plan for both buildings. So if you want to take that one, Mike.
Yeah, so in this building, it varies. We have some really small classrooms where there's 6 or 7. Most of the classrooms in the clusters are about 12 students in each room. It gets a little bigger when you get upstairs. You can fit 12 to 15. In the front hallway, the hallway going towards the back is about 15 to 18, and obviously more in the band room. So it really varies, especially in the high school. In elementary school, in one half of and I think I'm saying this right, Jim, I'm not sure, but one half of a cluster space, I think we put anywhere from 14 to 18 desks. And if we open that up so that it overlapped into another area, we could easily put close to 30 desks in those combined spaces. So,
I think one of the biggest issues that we'll have with the implementation of the distancing is with transition times. And we've talked about, hallways, but we'll certainly need to be promoting to families a true partnership in that drop-off area where we're transitioning from students leaving their transportation to the school and entering the school building, and making sure that students are being encouraged to make sure that they distance, just like we all do at the grocery stores when we're going in and going out, that we keep those distances, but making sure that students understand those expectations when they're moving around between one thing and the next. Because I think once you have a stationary classroom or space set up, it gets a little bit easier, but the going to and fro will be the tricky part. So I think that just being aware of that and problem solving. Thanks.
Just some folks promoting asynchronous schedule that just worked for them. Again, a lot of questions about what happens if there's a confirmed case. We're going to work with the nurses, and they will immediately be in contact with the Department of Health, and we will communicate, around FERPA guidelines. We're not going to be naming anyone, but we definitely will be reaching out to cohorts. The principals, Mike and I, will work very closely on how that communication is worked through with the immediate folks first, and then we would probably making a bigger announcement if there's a confirmed case. But we will go through those steps. Say that again. It's privacy around student information. We're not going to say Katie in room 2 just got COVID, and we were going to keep that information. So a student in our second grade class has contracted this, and this is what's going to happen, and we'll be in touch with you, and then we'll be in touch immediately with the parents in that classroom, and then we would have to make some decisions. The Department of Health is going to, it's going to be a school decision if something like that happens, that we say we're going to be out for 2 weeks and we're going to go totally remote. But we might leave the high school hybrid but people are on buses. There's a lot of cross contract in a small school district, so those decisions will be made. And then someone really just asked that the board become familiar with what substantive daily teaching is. So we will do that. We will make sure we get that defined. Folks just saying that too, they just want to know, they're still not sure what's going to happen with the 100% remote. So, I think we have a statement in the plan right now, and I think maybe before we leave here, we just go through and say, what's the expectation that you're looking for from me, so that I can work with my team on that.
I think a lot of the uncertainty around that and where these questions are coming from was that emergency, procedures that we did last with the virtual learning in the spring. And, folks are looking for reassurance that there's going to be more form and function involved in any remote learning this year. So being able to define that will be helpful.
I will say that, this discussion's been valuable. Because we have to get the plan in, I think we're going to get the plan in, and then each principal will come back to us and decide what that's going to look like by level. Also, there was something else that was really good on here. Mass breaks. Oh, this is a great question. On the parent survey, one area that seemed important to parents was their students receiving that extra academic support to catch up and meet deficits. Will this be, will this still be offered to our students? And absolutely, yes, that's a resounding yes. We haven't figured that out. That will be for the shared decision-making bodies to decide what that support day will look like, or what, that period 10, and how we can make sure that happens for students. I will say some other schools have done a 4-day, and we talked about this, a 4-day schedule with 1 day of cleaning or 1 day of support. But we recognize here in Lake George that we've been gone for so long that we want as much interaction and connection that we can get safely with our students. And that is almost all, other than the 50. And really respectfully, we need to look through those 50 questions, and we'll get back to this individual. So that's it for the questions. Bonnie, thank you so much for organizing. That was really helpful.
That's great. So thank you, everybody, for your input, for your thoughtful questions, and reminder that this is one part of the process as we continue to fine tune and, identify what our needs are, and then how we're going to meet those needs. And I think that the last bit that Lynn was just saying, that she wanted to hear from each of us on the board about some insights or thoughts and expectations that we have regarding those students who will, or families that choose the virtual learning. So is there anyone who'd like to start? All right, I will. I guess my expectation around that is the identification of the students as soon as possible, and the professional development of the teachers to be able to, have strategies in place to connect virtually. I also think that it's very, very important. It would be ideal if virtual learners had some sort of a touchstone each day where they got a chance to meet with a professional, maybe in a small group setting. So maybe there's a group of 6 to 10 who at one certain time each day are meeting with a school professional and debriefing how they're doing, and just that connection, not necessarily for instruction, but in order to meet whatever goals they have. And I don't have any expectation about how exactly that would happen. I just think that that's what I'm hearing from community members, is that they want more of that communication with professionals.
And I'm not texting, I'm writing.
That's okay. That's okay.
Well, I think another important part of that too is that expectations are clear. So we can move forward, productively. Which I'm sure we will. We have great faculty. There's no doubt. The best.
I've said this before too. I think that it's a wonderful thing for students to have a good amount of agency for themselves and personal goal setting, regardless of whatever age or stage that they are at, that they can set goals and that their family are partnering with them on those goals, and they're checking back in with the school so that those expectations are clear on every level, not just between the school and the parent, but the student is very much involved and being independent learner as much as they can be.
I just think I've said it a little bit before, but I just think, my expectation and hope would be, that we, maximize support for each other, for students and providers, and I agree strongly with what Tricia just said about, maximizing opportunities for kids to have a touchstone point with professionals very regularly.
My battery's going dead, so I'm going to speak up. But I guess can you hear me? My expectation would be to communicate what the plan is with all stakeholders, especially people who are actually doing the work. They need to know what the plan is and what is happening. So that's what I would hope that that would happen the next month.
And I would just add that, that we differentiate as much as possible, but within reason, that we're able to, one size doesn't fit all, but that we, look for ways to maximize those opportunities to differentiate.
Excellent. Any other comments from board members? Any closing comments from any of our other panelists? Put my glasses on.
I think one of the big things to just kind of say, Trish.
Oh, go ahead, Fran. Sorry.
Just one point that I don't want lost is that this is the plan as of July 30th, and of course, as we move through things in September, there's going to be adjustments, and as we see things are working, we can adjust them accordingly, and as we see things are not working, we certainly will adjust them with our staff and students' perspectives first and foremost. So I know that a lot of the things that were presented tonight, some folks might be saying, wow, I can't believe they're going in that direction, or I can't believe this, or I can't believe that. However, as we embark on this, we also don't know what October and November and December are going to look like, and that there's going to be adjustments along the way. So I don't know if anyone said that throughout the evening, and I know this is where our starting point is tonight, but throughout the coming weeks, there's going to be adjustments.
Fran, that's an excellent point, and I'd like to just reinforce the fact that, you know, our goal is to take care of each other, and this is a huge coming together of a lot of individual thoughts and opinions and expectations and creating a collective. And I think the goal is, even if there is an expectation that may be different than our own, that we're going in with as much care for other people's needs as we can to meet those needs, whether those be students, families, or faculty and staff. That is what we're about. We're a community, and we want to be here to support one another. So thank you. Anybody else?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to start, I'm just going to stop as well. This has been a huge undertaking since March 13th. And we started off thinking something very different than where we are now. And I just applaud everyone from the Board of Education. You know, you've been patient, you've been kind, you've been flexible, you've been supportive. Our leadership team has stepped up in ways that we didn't even know that we could. You know, I say a lot, but I think we've exceeded expectations here at Lake George, and I know we will continue. And I'm hoping that, you know, looking at what the shared decision-making team's commitment, the students, the parents, the faculty, staff, our BOCES has been unbelievable, the leadership that they have provided. And it's just been an unbelievable experience, and I know that we will continue to rise above. And you know, any question you have, bring it forward, because we might have the same question, and some people just don't want to ask it. But I know that, you know, we can have many more of these forums as we move through, and always remember, the governor has the last word here. So we've done all this planning, and a lot of this planning, I think, was so hard because we knew where we wanted to go. We thought we ended up somewhere very different, but in the end, we may not have an option in this. So, you know, just be open to what's going to happen and be patient and kind. And I just want to thank everybody for their support. And I'm interested really in the end of pretty much August and September, I'd love to hear from the students. I think we've done a lot of talking with adults, and at the center of all decisions that we make are students. And we have students who want to talk to us, and they want to share their experience, and they want to help. And I think we'd be remiss not to ask them to come and talk to us about what things they've learned and how they can help us be better from the lens of a student. So I'll leave you with that thought. So thank you.
Lynn, thank you very, very much for this presentation tonight, and all of your leadership. Thank you, board members, for the meeting with our masks and our technology. And we can all think about how this is where our students and our teachers are going to be very soon. We have a meeting coming up soon where we'll have more opportunity for conversation. But let's get a motion to adjourn. So moved. Gonna get a second? And Mary Ann seconds. And all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you all. Have a good night. Thank you. All right, well done.
I just saw everyone do the same thing. They all tried to take off their masks.
Yep.
Every single one.
I